Started fairly quickly. I think let's get started on time today. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Um, we're gonna get started on time today, whereas we usually will hold for a minute or two because we have two events happening today within the same Zoom link, which we're very excited about. So you might be here for one, the other, or both. But first, in our call tonight, we are going to be talking about three of the many elected and appointed seats that that folks can hold in Louisiana. So committees, boards, and elected positions in Louisiana. And then around the 5:30 mark, we'll be switching over to our State of the Session call. At that point, we'll be talking about what's on deck for session updates in the Louisiana State Legislative Session, which is ending on June 12th. And we just had a really wonderful farmer lobby day, thanks to some of you all who were there. So anyway, we're going to kick off first with that committee presentation. And again, welcome everybody. We have a small enough group for the committee presentation that folks can ask questions in the chat or raise their hands. And then if our group gets bigger, then I'll direct us to hold questions until the end. But let's kick it off. I'm going to present. And we're just excited because we want to get you guys civically activated. And oh, thank you, Devin. Civically activated and participating in all of the possible ways that you can be in Louisiana food and agriculture. So today we're going to be talking about the Louisiana STC, the COC, and the SWCD. And we'll talk about what those mean in a second. But what are these committees? Why do they matter? And how do you get involved? I'm Margie Green. I am the statewide director of Louisiana Food Policy Council. I'll kick it over to Devin.
I'm Devin. I'm Olive Sprout. Just kidding. I am the Deputy Director of Producers and Sustainability at Sprout. I don't know why I didn't put more details about my title in there. Great. Margie, we didn't necessarily cover how we wanted to back and forth on this.
Yeah, I'll kick it off maybe with the first slide, and then we'll go from like with the next subsequent slide, and we can just go back and forth from there. Sound good? Great. Devin and I are used to sort of rolling with the punches with each other. So in our call tonight, what we want to understand is the USDA sub-agency structure. So what are the structures of the agencies within the USDA? Because those sub-agencies we are recording it. Thank you, Sam. So those sub-agencies have different governing bodies and like ability to elect and make decisions. We're going to do a deep dive into three of these elected or appointed roles. That's going to be the State Technical Committee, the county committees, and the Soil and Water Conservation District. The State Technical Committee, also sometimes called the State Technical Assistance Committee or State Technical Advisory Committee, and the COC, the County Committee, are both explicitly USDA roles. The Soil and Water Conservation District is a non-governmental role. It is an appointed and sometimes elected role, but it's not within the superstructure of the USDA. It walks alongside the USDA. You might also be thinking, well, there's like some other big roles in the state that are elected and appointed. Yes, this is a great question in the chat. That are elected and appointed. Obviously, in Louisiana, we have an elected agricultural commissioner who sets state agricultural policy through the Department of Agriculture and Forestry. In some states, those are elected. In some states, they're appointed. Interestingly enough, it is exclusively the Deep South where they are appointed rather than elected, which it's not too conspiratorial to say that is in order to retain appointments from the majority party, which in recent history in America has mostly been the Republican Party in the Deep South, although obviously there's like a history of Democrats actually being sort of what some folks might refer to as like Dixiecrats or like an older Democratic Party. And there are some purple Southern states now. So we have seen some election across party lines of those state commissioners of agriculture and forestry. And then in other states outside of the Deep South, we see appointments rather than elections. So to answer Raymond's question that was in the chat, when we say county committee, that is indeed the parish committees in Louisiana. But since we, Louisiana, are, I think, the only state that uses parish, yeah, only state that uses parish. So it's broadly referred to as a COC or a county committee. And then our next goal is to know when, how, and why to engage with these committees and what's a good fit for you. So you might want to be on one. You might want to help somebody get on one. You might just want to go to these meetings and know who you're talking to and why they're in that room. So there's a myriad ways to engage with these committees, boards, etc. And we want you guys to be able to better understand how and why you might do that. And I'll kick it to you, Devin.
Okay, great. So some kind of like glossary definitional terms that we thought, oh,
I'm going to raise my hand and say, actually, because I wrote this slide and you have the substructure, let's do a switch them up and I'll do terms as well.
great.
So thanks for rolling with me there. So the first term that we're going to talk about is like technical assistance. You probably hear this term talked about a lot when you interact with folks at organizations like Louisiana Food Policy Council or Sprout or Breda, Market Umbrella. Technical assistance is like a very broad term for what we're talking about when we say we are helping someone navigate a technical part of the job they do. When we talk about doing technical assistance for farmers, it can mean everything from helping a farmer figure out how to set up irrigation in their fields to helping a farmer figure out something like how to run for a board or a committee. So, technical assistance literally means anyone who's helping you navigate any of the programs that exist for your farm. The USDA is the United States Department of Agriculture. The NRCS is a department of that, Natural Resource Conservation. FSA, AMS, RMA, and RD are all part of that substructure. Devin is going to show us a chart for that next. But are all those terms are all USDA functions. And Taina asked in the chat, what are the definitions for the STC, COC, and this Soil and Water Conservation District? We're going to actually show you those written out on the next slide, but it's State Technical Committee, which is the State Technical Committee of the NRCS, county committees, which are a structure of the FSA, and I promise you there will be a chart for this, and soil and water conservation districts, which are not USDA. They walk alongside the USDA. Term differentiation for elected versus appointed seems pretty, self-explanatory, but we want to name it is an elected position goes to an election. An appointed position means there is some sort of structure in which someone who's either on the board or a state official can appoint someone, handpick someone. Oftentimes they have to be like vetted by maybe the larger board, but it means they're given the seat rather than having to do a public election. Local, state, and federal are the levels on which these sorts of things happen. Local is usually your city or your parish. For many of us, those are synonymous, not for all of us. Orleans, for instance, is Orleans Parish. But oftentimes there are like sort of larger regions, or a parish will have many, many cities within it and towns and shires, whatever you have. State obviously is going to be the governance of the state of Louisiana. So we have the legislative body, it's got the House and the Senate. We've got a judiciary. We have elected and appointed positions on the state level, and then federal is obviously the entire governance of the United States of America. So that's the presidential level for things, and policy happens on all of those levels. Policy is just like how law works, right? When we talk about policies, it's just the like written text, the letter of the law, and how these things happen. And advocacy is what we do to try to influence policy. So when we go talk to lawmakers or decision makers about what we want to see change, that is advocacy. Um, and when we're doing advocacy either to these boards or elected officials often. And the other thing I would say is joining these boards or becoming one of these elected officials is a phenomenal way of being an advocate and changing something that you want to see in your community. A board is going to be a formation that governs something. So boards govern nonprofits, boards govern commissions, councils. It is the legal structure for governance or enforcement for multiple types of entities. So a board can be a public board, it can be an elected board, an appointed board. It's really just kind of a catch-all term for a structure of multiple people who are enacting governance on a commission or a committee. A nonprofit is going to be an organization that reinvests the profit of the organization back into the programs of the organization. So a nonprofit does not make a profit. It doesn't share a profit out with stakeholders. So if you work for a nonprofit and the nonprofit does really well, you don't get rich. You just keep making the same amount that you make because the thing that you're trying to make when you work at a nonprofit is the mission of the nonprofit. A non-governmental organization is not necessarily a nonprofit, but it is an organization that functions somewhat like a like it does the actions and functions of the government, but it is not necessarily governed by our state, federal, or local governments. And then the government is the biggest thing that we all interact with. It is the legal structure and the like policy implementation structure, which we all live within. Okay. So I just was a wall of sound. And unfortunately, the next slide is going to be this intense chart that Devin is about to explain. But I trust you, Devin, to make it fun.
I don't know if I'm gonna make it fun, but I'll try. Um, how do I click to the next slide? Okay, cool. Also, one thing that I think is helpful is typically we refer nonprofits and NGOs are often one and the same. Typically, we refer to them as nonprofits within the United States. They are more commonly referred to as NGOs outside of the United States. So, organizations that work internationally or do like diplomatic kind of work and try and provide support to other underdeveloped or lesser developed countries. Those are typically referred to as NGOs. They're providing social services outside of the parameters of the government of that country. So that's typically like a geographic distinction. Okay, so USDA organization chart. USDA has, at last I checked, this is obviously, or not obviously, this is changing right now due to federal actions and federal budget cuts. But the USDA had over 100,000 employees, making it one of the largest, I think it's either the first or the second largest federal department in the federal government. Probably pretty close up there with like defense and that kind of thing. Yeah. So, or in terms of like, I think that would probably depend on how you define, because obviously like our military is bigger than 100,000 people, but in terms of like federal employees that are within the department itself. Yeah, so USDA is very big. It has a lot of different kind of branching responsibilities. This chart hopefully can kind of like not necessarily clarify some of that, but just give an idea about the breadth of what is covered. So these kinds of one thing that is worth noting is the secretary who is appointed by the president. So again, that appointed versus elected position is very powerful. So the Secretary of Agriculture, who has been appointed by Trump, so feasibly will be the Secretary of Agriculture for the next 4 years, is Brooke Rollins. Highly encourage you all to just like look up a quick little article about her, just to know who is in charge of ultimately making decisions about this entire department. Obviously, she still answers to Trump, and ostensibly, those two people or these people all answer to us as the people that vote for them, or vote for Trump, who then appoints Secretary Rollins. So that's the secretary. It all trickles up to her, Margie.
Can I just clarify? I think everyone knows this, but it's the time to be reminded, is that theoretically your elected officials work for you whether you voted for them or not. That is obviously theoretical because that doesn't always end up being what happens. But in an elective democracy, the idea is you are not supposed to not engage with an elected official that you didn't vote for. They are still supposed to serve you. And I see, some comments in the chat that might speak to this idea. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows like you still need to advocate and make your needs and voices heard, regardless of whether it's to the home team or not, even if you think it won't make a difference as well.
Yeah, so if anybody says tough toenails, you're gonna have to zip your lips for the next 4 years because you didn't vote for this particular administration, or even if you did, that's not accurate. A democracy doesn't stop representing you. Yeah. Great clarification, Margie. Also, if you would just help me, because I can't look at the chat at the same time as showing the screen. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so all of this kind of like under layer is not super important. It's like a level of detail that most folks do not really need to engage in. I think there's 16 sub-agencies within the Department of Agriculture. These like offices you're probably not going to interface with them very much. And even these undersecretaries, you're not going to engage with them very much. These are the sub-agencies down here. And probably most of these you aren't going to engage with very much either. But the ones that are blocked off in this like pinkish red color, these are the kind of key offices that you may engage with or probably would engage with most directly as a producer yourself. There are a couple of other ones that I'm going to highlight very quickly just because they are relevant, but are not the key ones. So FNS, that one is really important for like nutrition and hunger, which overlaps a lot with feeding. So there's a lot of like, this is, thinking comprehensively about the food system. The Department of Agriculture is not just the production of food, they also do a lot with nutrition. That also extends over here into food safety and inspection, animal and plant inspection service. That one is the animal and plant health inspection service. It's like a little bit closer to the producer side of things, but making sure that ultimately all of these products get to people for consumption as food, or some of them get to people for consumption as food. Also, worth kind of mentioning is the Forest Service falls under the Department of Agriculture, so there's some like real environmental kind of conservation overlaps with other departments like fisheries and wildlife and things like that that are outside of the USDA. And then there's some research, education, and economics. These departments or sub-agencies have had increasingly small budgets, or their budgets have shrunk over the last 40 years. So generally in the United States, we are on a trajectory to really disinvest in agricultural research. And so things like the Agricultural Research Service, the National Agriculture Statistical Service, the NIFA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the Economic Research Service are able to do less and less because they have less and less money. So these folks generally put out like really large data sets that researchers then kind of manipulate to make meaningful more on the ground. I'm bringing this up because a lot of this research is very high level and it focuses on commodities. Not a lot of what these folks do is very like on the ground. And so I think it's worth propping or kind of giving a shout out to programs like SARE, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Extension program, which does like farmer-led, very on-farm trialing and research for producers. So there is a big role for research to play. And there's a big history about why research isn't necessarily serving small-scale diversified producers today. The key sub-agencies that we are going to focus on, because they do have implications for small-scale diversified producers, which is most of the folks we work with, are rural development. So this whole bucket is kind of comprehensively rural development. This is obviously more relevant for folks in rural areas, but that agency is in charge of, and it kind of Makes sense, or it goes or it falls under agriculture because agricultural communities are typically rural communities. We know that that's not always the case because we do have urban communities that farm, urban farming. So there is like a little bit of nuance there, but typically those two things kind of go hand in hand. And so rural economies tend to be disproportionately agricultural economies. So there is a department that props up, or this rural development department makes investments in rural infrastructure, rural life, and rural communities pretty specifically. So things like housing, things like utilities, the Rural Energy for America program, REAP program, which had larger money invested in it under the Biden administration. And that seems to be still going through under the Trump administration. That falls under rural development. That helps or can be used to help farms get access to solar panels. It's a little bit complicated. There are some thresholds, but it is something that we know producers, or at least one producer in Louisiana, has gotten to have a rural development cost share on their solar panels for their farm. So that program happens under rural development. Then there's the agricultural marketing service. This is where a lot of like local food systems and local food economies programs come through. So those won't necessarily go directly to producers, but it's things that help farmers markets to run, and like SNAP benefits that, or like SNAP matching programs sometimes will funnel through AMS. And various other kinds of programs that help create the market kind of infrastructure and market environment that allows producers to be viable in producing certain crops. Sorry, still recovering a little bit. And then over here we have Undersecretary of Farm Production and Conservation, and I honestly cannot even tell you who that person is, but that is one person. And there is the Farm Service Agency, Risk Management Agency, and Natural Resources Conservation Service all fall under there. These are our big three. Margie, sorry, go ahead.
We've got a chat question, and I'm going to do a time check, which I talked a lot, my fault, not yours. But Jerry asked, has anyone experienced that these local agencies seem unaware of programs that affect small-scale row crop vegetable farmers? And the answer is a resounding yes. 100%. It is the main reason that we're doing something like this, because if we can get the people in those agencies and on the boards of those agencies to be y'all, the small scale specialty crop and row crop vegetable farmers, then they will understand the programs. We've already seen that kind of happen in other places. So throwing it back to you, Devin.
Yeah, so Farm Service Agency, this agency is they're a little bit of the gatekeepers of USDA. They're the ones that help you get a farm number, and they also handle project or things like loans. They also run the non-insured disaster assistance program, which is one option that might be useful to some small-scale producers. Whole farm revenue protection is another option, and that runs through the Risk Management Agency, which predictably their job is to kind of try and buffer producers from risk. So things like crop insurance fall under RMA's purview. And then lastly is the Natural Resources Conservation Service. These are the folks that producers tend to engage a lot with, particularly small scale producers tend to engage a lot with, because they do on-farm conservation work. And these are some of the programs that we've had the greatest success in getting individual farmers access to. So yeah, thinking of their big thing is conservation and how do you be more sustainable and conserve natural resources on farm. Cool. Next slide.
Yeah, let's do it. That's very nice, Jerry. Like, we really want you guys to be the people who get to make these decisions because they impact you all. So, to the question that we got earlier from Taina. So the full name of the LASTC, or the STEC, is the State Technical Advisory Committee. It provides advice and recommendations to the NRCS, state conservationists, which is like, I will say the guy because it is always a guy in Louisiana. Maybe someday it will not be, but the guy who does the implementation of NRCS programs. So that's those EQIP programs, the conservation programs. That's like how people get those high tunnels. It's all of that on-farm conservation stuff that can really impact small scale and specialty crop farmers when it's administered in a way that understands those small scale farmers. We've seen it like wildfire. The minute that NRCS offices started to understand small scale vegetable farmers, people started getting high tunnels. But those high tunnels were available in Louisiana for so long before there was this sea change of NRCS offices starting to meet you guys and getting to know you guys. So that's the stack, as we call it. It meets in Alexandria because it's a state committee. It meets in the fall and spring annually with some ad hoc committees that are locally led. And its decision-making authority is purely advisory. So it doesn't do official voting, where that voting is then like legally codified. It's more advisory. The way that you can be part of this board is going to be by participating through a technical assistance organization. So individual farmers are not often members of that stack. I believe that they technically can be. Devin.
Yeah, so I actually just got clarification
Oh,
in
great.
on this. Yeah. So this every state has a technical advisory committee by statute. So that means that these are legally required to exist. The state conservationist has to call them. Individual farmers can put themselves up to be members of these state technical committees. You just have to make a really good case for why your voice needs to be in the room, why you should be one of the few people that is advising the state on how NRCS programs should work. The state conservationists can say yay or nay. That is at their discretion. So you can be on it as an individual, but at the very least, all of the stack meetings are open meetings, which means that you, as a member of the public, whether you're a farmer or not, has the right to be in that room and to witness that meeting and to listen to that meeting. I'm saying this because I have gone to several stack meetings, and the first meeting that I went to, I was the only person in that room who was representing interests that were not commodities. So it is a very one-sided or one type of production type of space. That has started to change a little bit. And it is, like Margie kind of said, the second that you get a foot in the door, the conversation changes fairly quickly. And there is like the teasing apart of that space and making more room for small scale and diversified or vegetable producers has really pretty dramatically grown. And so I think that it's if you are in Alexandria or thereabouts, or if you don't mind a drive, I do think it's like worthwhile to be there and show these folks that you exist, period.
And I would
Um,
say on that note too, when Devin says the conversation changes quickly, one of the like sort of heartening things we've noticed is that people actually want small farmer voices in there. They just honestly don't know you guys. And so I'm not going to say that that's entirely true across the board, but a lot of the time, the fact that these things are limited is actually because the knowledge base from the people in these rooms are limited about like how your farms work. Um, the next committee is the COC or the county committee, as we clarified. That's actually parish or what's called, it can be multiple parishes. They're called LAAs or local advisory areas. And so, for instance, the county committee that serves Orleans Parish also serves Jefferson and St. Bernard. We're going to have people rolling in now for the state of the session call. So we're going to wrap this part of it up fairly quickly. But those county committees are elected. A ballot is sent out to all of the farmers with farm numbers in your district, and then you get voted on. I'm a member of our COC. I'm an elected official in my second term on our county committee here in Orleans. I would love for someone to run against me next because I do not want to continue to be on that seat. Because when you've been on something for 2 terms, it's time for there to be a new voice. It's been really wonderful. We do have the authority to reverse or uphold decisions made by the FSA staff when applications from farmers in our district are approved or denied by our FSA those applications come to us as a county committee, and we get to check them. We look through a farmer's documentation, and that means that when programs are released for farmers in our district, we're at the forefront of deciding who gets what as an elected board. It's a very cool responsibility. Um, so there's an executive committee session for every meeting. The meetings are monthly, and that executive committee session is closed because we look through people's paperwork in that session. And then there is an open and public session, which is open to everyone. There's one chair that's appointed by a vote annually, and we've rotated in our county committee who gets to be the chair and not run competitively. And then the committee votes equally. It's just that the chair moves business forward by like signing off on things. And then the last one we're talking about today is the Soil and Water Conservation District. They deliver technical and financial assistance to farmers, ranchers, and landowners, and they administer state and federal conservation programs in coordination with state agencies and the NRCS. They promote conservation through like programs. They get to decide what those programs are. So if folks like you guys are not on these soil and water conservation districts, then the programs that they put on are not going to serve folks like you guys. So if we have small scale and vegetable farmers on these committees, they put on relevant programs. If we don't, they don't put on as relevant of programs. They encourage voluntary conservation. They do sometimes local grants. They do some cost sharing for landowners in implementing conservation practices. They have the ability to purchase unified equipment that helps with conservation, erosion, land management. For instance, the Crescent Soil and Water Conservation District owns bore traps that can be rented out to landowners to trap bores. They've considered and are in the process of considering getting a no-till drill that could be rented out among parish landowners and farmers. Does not to interact with the board, you do not need to be a landowner, but folks who sit on the board do need to be landowners. It is defined as a district. A district looks like a different amalgamation of parishes for each one of those districts. They have monthly board meetings and a formal voting process. For the most part, these roles are appointed, not elected. They are occasionally, when there is contention about an appointee, they occasionally go to an election. The state of Louisiana has only ever seen 7 elections for soil and water conservation districts in the entire state. When you think about that across every parish for the past 100 years, that's pretty wild. We're going to go to the next slide and wrap up here, but I will say very exciting is that one of those 7 elections ever is happening on June 14th. So this is like a really prime place to participate in one of these processes. There are 2 folks running against one another for the Crescent Soil and Water Conservation District. So you have this rare opportunity to go out and vote on who is representative of you on those districts. Devin, this is your slide. So if you click through, there is a graphic that we can share with folks about where they can go vote um, in that. And I can also drop it if you want to start talking about the COC and STC.
Sure, great. Yeah, I can't figure it out. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So, also just to clarify, you have to vote in the Soil and Water Conservation District election, you have to be in Orleans, Jefferson, or St. Charles Parish for this particular election. In terms of the stack, the State Technical Committee, that again is going to be in Alexandria. I am trying to encourage them to do a digital meeting. I encourage you all to reach out to Dana Schuff with the state NRCS office if you would also like to have a digital option, but that is likely to be in September or October. They are 3-hour long meetings. They start at 9:30 a.m., I believe, at the Alexandria office, at the Alexandria USDA office. And then, Margie, you actually have more information on the county committees than I do.
Sure. Yeah. So county committee nominations are due on June 16th. There's a click through there too. We can drop that in the chat as well. That means if you're within Orleans, St. Bernard, Jefferson, and Plaquemine Parish, and you want to be on a county committee And then also, so this is two things. Nominations are due for everywhere that has an LAA that is open. We don't comprehensively know everywhere that has a seat up for election. The link that we're going to drop allows you to look up what LAA, what district you're in, and allows you to either self-nominate or nominate somebody else for for those board seats. Please do that. It was almost a decade ago when I nominated the very first urban farmer I know of in Louisiana that's ever been on a county committee. Her name is Maggie Kaiser. She runs Two Tall Farms. And truly, it was a decade ago when we nominated her for a rural county committee. We didn't understand how the process worked, and we wanted to just kind of give it a test run and see if it played. And Maggie was on that county committee, and that county committee is actually, it was rural at the time. Maggie being in that room is actually what got us to interface with the new urban county committee. So she ran unopposed because, for the most part, a lot of these districts do not have farmers running for them. And so then those meetings are like ghost towns, and no one's there checking any of these processes. And then sometimes the folks that are on these boards are folks who are not actually interacting with agriculture. They might just be a landowner sitting on empty land. And so all that is to say, these are low lift seats to run for. We encourage you guys to run for them because it's a great way to participate in agricultural systems like these. And it's a fairly low lift to win. It's not like some big campaign where people are very competitive. It is a ballot that gets sent out in the mail, and they're very rarely competitive. So here's some voting information about that upcoming Soil and Water Conservation District election that's here in Orleans, St. Charles, and Jefferson. Like we said, it's a very rare election. It would be very interesting to see everybody go out and vote on June 14th so we can kind of see like how much people care and participate in these systems. And then the next link that I'm going to drop is the how to figure out um, if you could possibly run for one of these county committee seats, which again, I really encourage you to run for one of these county committee seats. And as a member of the Orleans Parish County Committee, I am super happy to talk to you about it. I'm super happy to encourage you to take my spot. Like, yeah, Taina, like you said, this is the problem is people run unopposed because they don't know. And it is a sad, democracy dies in darkness, right? Like it's a sad day if we have all of these unopposed seats making decisions for people. So I think we should just get people in these seats and reinvigorate all of these models. As a county committee member myself, I was able to approve the first urban application for a farm that got hit by a tornado. Never in the state of Louisiana had a vegetable farm gotten a payout for a disaster like that from the USDA. And they got to because it was other farmers in the room reading that application and learning how to interpret that application. These small boards can be very boring and they can make a huge difference. So just really encourage you guys to interact with them, run for them, vote for them. And both Devin and I are here to talk to you about how to